Well, greetings to each of you, and welcome to the Shakedown, a podcast about corrections, for corrections, and by corrections. I am your host, Aaron Dawson. Good to be with you for another episode. We hit a milestone in the month of August, last week of August. We hit our 50th episode. That is quite awesome and quite wild, if I'm being honest, to think that we've been on this journey long enough to have 50 episodes. And our desire is to continue onward and upward, to keep pushing, keep growing. Glad to have you with us on this week's episode. And if you've been listening to the podcast for any length of time, you know that we've covered a variety of topics, from very practical things to more, maybe you might say philosophical things, to more socially or culturally interesting things, so forth and so on. And I hope they have all been beneficial to you and that you've enjoyed them. I want to talk about something this week, and maybe we'll see where it goes. A couple weeks. I believe it was the 16th of August, the CDC put out a report, and this report covers the suicide deaths in the United States in the year 2022. And we had seen that the numbers of suicides per year had dropped in 2019 and then 2020. And then in 2021, those numbers jumped. I believe it was by a good 8%. And then there was yet another increase in 2022, about 2.5%. And when I saw this report and I looked at the report, I just felt like it was important that we take a little bit of time and discuss this topic. Now, anytime you see articles or you hear people talk about suicide, there's often they immediately go to the discussion of the causes, and you think about in 2019 and 2020, there being a drop, and then 21 there was this increase. There were a lot of people saying that was a result of COVID and the lockdowns and people having to be isolated and away from family members, and kids not being able to go to school or college, or all that social isolation, and there's probably a great deal of truth to that. But then when we get to 2022, we were out of that, and so anyway, there are often those that they look for causes on kind of a big picture. What's going on in the nation? What's going on in the culture? What's going on that is causing these numbers that we're seeing? And there are a host of quote unquote causes that people like to bring up. But it doesn't matter from a psychological perspective. There have always been the same causes of suicide. And those causes are hopelessness and despair. The hopelessness that I don't have any hope, that whatever the situation is, there is absolutely nothing that I can find hope in, that there's no silver lining, there's no light at the end of the tunnel, and then despair that it's never going to get any better. Suicide always stems from hopelessness and despair. And when we consider it from that perspective, that regardless of the quote-unquote cause of the hopelessness and despair, it's always hopelessness and despair that leads to someone considering or unfortunately pursuing suicide. The numbers in 2022, there were 49,449 people, according to this report, that ended their life by suicide. Of that 49,000, 39,000 of them were men, and only 10,000 were women. The part that jumped out at me the most is when you break these numbers down by age. In the age 10 to 24 years, there was 6,529. And on the other end of it, 65 plus, there was 10,433. The two biggest numbers, the two biggest chunks of this are in the 25 to 44 year range, and the 45 to 64 year range. In the first of those, the 25 to 44 range, there were almost 17,000 people, and in the 45 to 64, there were just shy of 16,000 people. I would venture to say that the majority of those in our profession in corrections fall into that 25 to 64 year category. And so, guys, the point being, this is something that is an issue, and often I feel like is not appropriately and sufficiently addressed. And so I wanted to take just some time and let's talk about this. You see, in our profession and in the facilities that we work, we are familiar with layers of safety. You would not consider it wise to have a facility in which a housing unit that houses inmates had an exterior door that led right into the free open world. You would think, well, that's foolish, because if that inmate can get through that one layer of security, they're free. And so we're used to the concept of layers of security or layers of safety to protect the community from those that the courts have deemed need to be incarcerated. Well, just like in our facilities and just like in our profession, we have these layers of safety. Psychologically, we have the same thing. We have some psychological layers of safety that provide some psychological fortitude, if you will, that allow us to defend ourselves from hopelessness, despair, and heaven forbid, suicidal ideation. And so I want to take some time and discuss those layers of security or those layers of safety, because I think it's important that we be reminded of these, or maybe be informed of these for the first time, and to talk about it and to take a good hard look inside ourselves and say, okay, how are my safety measures? Are they good? Are they strong? Are they in place? Are they secure? Or am I weak in some of these areas? And so I want to talk about these layers, if you will, of psychological safety or security that we have. So the first layer is it is important that we have something to live for. We have something to live for. Now, that something that we live for, it has to be transcendent. It has to be bigger than and or outside of ourselves. Someone might say, okay, well, I've got to have something to live for. Okay, I want to be happy. I want to be happy. That's my goal. That's what I live for. That's what I'm going to do. Well, that doesn't work. Statistically, and the research has shown that happiness, as it were, does not work as our goal or our vision or our purpose that we live for, because happiness is arbitrary. I mean, how many times have you or I thought that, we wanted something? Maybe it was some piece of technology, maybe it was a house, maybe it was a vehicle, whatever, a relationship. We wanted something specific, and then if we could get that, whatever it was, if we could acquire that, man, it would be amazing. We'd be so happy, it'd be so awesome. And then we get it, and then we quickly find out that we do not want it, but the investment's already been made, or the purchase has already been made, or a commitment's already been made, and we're stuck with it. So happiness is arbitrary. Happiness is temporary at best. You or I could have a situation in which everything is going our way, and so, man, we are happy. Then something comes along in life that takes that down. All of a sudden, we are unhappy. So whatever it is that we are living for, it's got to be bigger than just happiness. A few things about this something that we're living for. Number one, it has to challenge us. It has to challenge. It has to be an adventure. It has to be something that generates some excitement. It has to be something that motivates us to pursue it. So it has to challenge us as an adventure. It has to be something that we want to strive for, that we want to work for, that we're willing to sacrifice to get. I remember being in school and playing sports, and I wanted to be that baseball player. I wanted to be that basketball player. I wanted to be that soccer player that could get out on the court, could get out on the field, and could really contribute, can really make a difference. Well, if that was something that I wanted to accomplish, that was going to take some sacrifice. That was going to take some work. That was going to take some sweat. That was going to take some time. It was something that, that pushed me in to pursue. And it was an adventure. There was the excitement of the competition and the, not knowing what's going to happen. And, me and my team giving our best against this other team that's giving their best and seeing, who's going to come out victorious. So this vision, this purpose, this goal, it has to be something that challenges us as an adventure. Secondly, it has to challenge us by providing an ethical framework. There has to be an ethical framework. There has to be a way of viewing, pursuing this, certain pursuits as, okay, this is good, or this is beneficial, or this is helpful, or this is right, and this is not. If I'm wanting to be a good athlete and, I want to say, okay, I put in an extra hard practice, I put in an extra hard work, and I want to reward myself for putting in that hard work. And so I'm going to go gorge myself on on some fattening food, and I'm going to take the weekend and I'm just going to live it up. Well, that's not beneficial. That's not helping me reach my goal. So in that ethical framework, yeah, it might be fun, but that's bad, or that's wrong, or that's counterproductive. So this vision, this goal we're pursuing, it has to challenge us as an adventure, and it has to challenge us by providing an ethical framework. And we think about, an obvious illustration of this in our line of work is the law. The law provides that ethical framework. It says, look, this behavior, this way of doing things, this way of operating is good and right and lawful and acceptable, and this is not. So, we have to have that ethical framework to guide what it is that we are pursuing. The third thing is it has to challenge us by providing tangible goals. I've heard some people say, okay, well, my goal or my vision or my purpose is I want to be a better person. Okay, that sounds good, and yes, hopefully that's all of our goals, is to be a better person. But what does that mean? What are you going to do different today than you did yesterday to be a quote-unquote better person? There's no tangible goals in that. Now, could you set that as your overall goal and then break that down into components and say, okay, if I'm going to be a better person, that means I'm going to be a better spouse, and to be a better spouse means I do X, Y, and Z. Sure, absolutely. But there has to be tangible goals for us to pursue. There has to be a measuring stick to where, we can look at it and say, okay, on such a date, I set this as my vision, my goal, my purpose. How far have I come? How far have I made it towards my goal? There has to be a tangible goal. Research has shown that the only way that you and I are going to experience positive emotion in our everyday life is through the pursuit of a goal. And how are we going to know how far along we've come if we don't actually set tangible goals? So it has to challenge us. We see that it has to challenge us as an adventure. It has to challenge us by providing an ethical framework, and it has to challenge us by providing tangible goals. The second part about this purpose, or this something that we live for, it has to involve others. And you say, now hold on, whoa, what? My goal, my protection, my safety measure, psychologically, this vision, this purpose, this goal that I have, it has to involve other people. Absolutely. It has to involve other people. It has to involve us investing in other people. It has to involve allowing them to invest in us. And I'm not saying you have to be everybody's friend and you just need to go in the middle of the mall or in the middle of Walmart or the middle of the park and be like, hey, everybody, come talk to me. No, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is we cannot allow ourselves to be completely isolated. We have got to have social interaction. Often when you hear about, maybe there was a shooting somewhere and you had somebody that come in and it seems randomly took the lives of multiple people that they didn't even know. Without fail, those people were antisocial. They were socially isolated. Now, there is a difference between antisocial and asocial. Antisocial is I am against society. Asocial is I'm not so much against society. I just want to be left alone. I don't want to talk to anybody. Well, that isolation is not conducive to our being psychologically healthy. So this vision, this goal, this purpose, it must include other people. So the first safety measure, the first layer of security that we have, that we need to have in place is to make sure that we have something to live for. And that could be, a pursuit of a faith. That could be a pursuit in our family. That could be pursuit in our job. The possibilities are endless, but we have to have something to live for. The second layer, and that's probably all we'll have time for this week, but the second layer, so we have the first layer is have something to live for. The second layer is to fulfill our roles. What do I mean by that? Well, all of us, we have roles, three kinds of roles that we need to make sure we fulfill. The first of these is the natural roles. These are the ones that come as a part of the family in which we were born. Me personally, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a nephew, a cousin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those are roles that come with responsibilities. As a husband, I have a responsibility to my wife. As a father, I have a responsibility to my children. As a son, I have a responsibility to my parents. As a brother, a responsibility to my siblings. And I need to make sure that I am fulfilling those roles. Back to what we talked about in the first layer, the importance of that involving or investing or involving other people and me investing in them and them investing in me. A very natural way for that to take place is to make sure that I am fulfilling those natural roles. And if I am not fulfilling those natural roles, there are going to be issues. There's going to be psychological and emotional issues that I deal with. And so I need to make sure that those relationships are being maintained. So there's natural roles. Secondly, there's social roles. Those are the roles that we, if I'm an administrator, then I'm a leader. And that's a role that I have to fulfill. I have people that they're not family, but they're friends or they're coworkers. That's a social role that I have or that you have. And so I need to make sure that those relationships are being maintained and that I'm fulfilling that role like I need to the best of my ability. And then the last role, and this has become more controversial as of late, but that is the biological role. Research has shown that as a rule, not always, not 100% of the time, but as a rule, males tend to have a specific type of personality makeup. Again, there's variation there. I'm not saying it's across the board, but as a general rule, males tend to have a certain personality makeup, and females tend to have a certain personality makeup. And those personality makeups lend themselves to certain types of roles in the culture, in our families, and in society. Males, as a general rule, tend to be more of a motivating encourager. Now, we may do that by harassing each other. We may do that by calling each other out. We may do that by poking or picking at each other. But it's a motivating encouragement. Whereas females tend to be more compassionate. They tend to be more merciful, if you will. They tend to be more able to engage with people on a deeper level than just action or activity. Again, those are just general rules, so don't come at me with all this. Well, I'm not like that. I get that general rule. So we need to make sure that we're fulfilling our natural roles, our social roles, and our biological roles. And how we do that is we need to make sure we're setting improvement goals. My wife and I, we've been blessed to have been married for 22 years now. And when we first got married, there was no question in my mind that I loved this woman. There was no question. I was committed to her. I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. I knew that I loved her. But if I compare our relationship today to what it was when it began those years ago, the love I had for her on our wedding day pales in comparison to what it is today. Why? Because we've lived together, we've experienced life together, we've faced challenges, difficulties, tragedies, victories. We've had fun, we've had arguments, we've had good times, bad times, et cetera, et cetera. Set improvement goals. Okay, if I want my relationship in my natural roles, if I want them to improve, what are some things that I could do? If I want my social roles to improve, set improvement goals. And when we do this, back to that first layer, this provides a regular day in and day out purpose. This provides us something that meets the criteria of having something to live for. And I'm not saying this be the only thing we live for, but this is a very practical way to live that out. So that first layer, have something to live for. That second layer, fulfilling our roles. Well, guys, we're out of time for this week, and still got some more I want to make sure I cover with you. So we'll pick up where we left off with this. We'll pick up with this next week. But in the meantime, guys, if there's anything, questions, comments, concerns, you can shoot me an email, shakedown@jailtraining.org, shakedown@jailtraining.org. I'd love to hear from you. Got any thoughts or questions about it? Love to hear from you, and make it part of the episode, if at all possible. But guys, I hope what we talked about today at least got you to thinking. And until next time, stay sharp, stay safe, stay vigilant. Godspeed.